The millionaire was forced to marry a blind girl, but when she touched his face, everything changed. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories every week. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. Rain drifted across the San Francisco skyline like threads of silver, sliding down the glass walls of Stone Farm Tower. Inside, Harry Stones, 34, sat at the head of the boardroom table. His jaw was tense, his tie perfectly knotted, his eyes colder than the fog outside. The company lawyers had just finished reading the clause that would decide his future. According to your father's will, one of them said, you must be married before your 35th birthday to retain full control of Stone Farm. If you refuse, the board will transfer authority to your uncle, Charles Stone. Harry's pen froze above the contract. The words seemed absurd. Marriage as a business condition. He had built this company from a small lab to one of the most powerful pharmaceutical firms in California, and now a piece of paper could strip it away. His lawyer cleared his throat. There is one candidate your uncle cannot contest, Emma Green. She is the adopted daughter of board member Margaret Green. She would make the arrangement legally valid. Harry looked up sharply. Emma Green? She is blind, is she not? Yes, the lawyer said quietly. She lost her sight in an accident 5 years ago. But she is kind, discreet, and more importantly, she will not ask for your money. A bitter laugh escaped him. A marriage to a woman who will never see my face. That is convenient. Outside the window, lightning flared over the bay. He signed the contract anyway, the pen scratching through the silence. Fine. If that is what it takes to protect my company, set the date. 3 days later, the grand hall of City Hall gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Emma Green stood there in a pale ivory dress, her hands folded neatly around a white cane. Her calmness unsettled him. She turned toward the faint sound of his steps. You must be Mr. Stones, she said softly. I know this is not what you wanted. Harry hesitated, studying her delicate features, the eyes that did not focus, the faint smile that never reached them. You know what this is, he replied. A contract, nothing more. She nodded once. Then let us both keep our promises. I do not need your love, just your honesty. The officiant began to speak, words echoing against marble walls. Harry slipped the ring onto her finger, the gesture mechanical. Cameras flashed, the papers were signed, and it was done. As they left the hall, rain poured again, blurring the lights of the city into gold and gray streaks. Emma lifted her face toward the sound, feeling the droplets on her skin. It smells like the ocean, she whispered. Harry glanced at her, surprised by the calm in her voice. For the first time, he noticed the faint scar near her temple, a mark of the accident that had taken her sight. He felt something shift inside him, something small, almost imperceptible. He opened the car door for her without thinking. She paused, fingers brushing lightly against his hand, tracing the shape of his knuckles. Thank you, she said quietly. The touch lingered longer than it should have. For a man who had built walls around every part of his life, that single moment felt strangely alive. And as the car disappeared into the San Francisco rain, Harry Stones told himself it was just a business deal. But somewhere deep down, he already knew it would never stay that simple. The next morning, sunlight poured through the tall windows of the Stones mansion, a glass and marble fortress overlooking the quiet curves of San Francisco Bay. The house was filled with the sound of footsteps that were not his. Emma Green had arrived before dawn. Harry stood on the landing above, watching her through the glass balustrade. She moved slowly, one hand brushing the wall, the other holding her white cane. Every step was deliberate, graceful, and unafraid. The housekeeper had offered to guide her, but Emma had simply smiled and said, I will learn the way myself. Her calmness unsettled him again. Most people shrank from him. She did not. When she reached the living room, she stopped near the grand piano, tilting her head toward the sound of waves far beyond the glass doors. It is louder here in the mornings, she said softly. The ocean. Harry came down the stairs, his shoes clicking on marble. The tide hits the rocks below, he replied. It will fade by noon. I like it, she said. It sounds alive. He nodded, unsure what to say next. A silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the house and the distant call of gulls. At breakfast, the chef placed a full meal before them. Emma traced the edge of her plate with her fingers before lifting the fork perfectly. Her manners were precise, practiced. Harry could not help but watch. "You are used to people watching you," he said finally. She smiled faintly. "Not watching. Listening. Most people reveal more through silence than through sight." "My goting." He set down his cup, slightly disarmed. "You speak as if you can read minds." "No," she said. "Just tones. I can hear when someone is pretending." Harry looked away toward the windows. "Then, you must hear that a lot." Her smile did not fade. "Every day." Later that afternoon, a driver brought Emma to the company's charity wing, where she would attend the first public appearance as Mrs. Stones. The building's glass facade shimmered against the fog. Cameras were waiting. Harry had prepared short talking points for her to repeat, but when she stepped onto the stage, she ignored the script. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice calm but clear, "I do not have sight, but I have something else. When you lose one sense, you discover the value of all the others: compassion, trust, honesty. Those are what keep people alive when everything else fails." The room grew silent. Harry froze behind her, surprised. This was not part of the plan. And yet, as she finished speaking, the audience began to applaud. That night, back at the mansion, Emma stood on the balcony, wind brushing her hair. Harry approached quietly, stopping a few steps away. "You went off script today," he said. "I know," she replied, turning slightly toward his voice. "Did I embarrass you?" "No," he said after a moment. "You impressed them." She smiled. "And you?" He hesitated. "I do not know yet." "Lay." She lifted her hand slightly, as if searching for something in the air. "Then let me thank you for letting me speak anyway." He looked at her hand, suspended between them, delicate and uncertain. Without thinking, he reached out and placed his palm beneath hers. Her fingers trembled as they met his skin, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "You always sound so distant," she whispered. "But your face, it feels sad." He swallowed hard, every muscle tightening. "You should not touch me like that," he said quietly. "I did not mean to offend," she answered, her hand pulling back, but he caught her wrist gently. "You did not." His voice softened, lower than he intended. "It just surprised me." The moment lingered between them, fragile and unspoken. Somewhere below, the ocean struck the rocks again, steady as a heartbeat. Emma lowered her head. "You are afraid to be seen," she said. He looked at her, startled. "I am standing right in front of you." "Kuh." "But not really," she said. "Not yet." She turned and walked back inside, leaving him alone with the echo of her words. For the first time in years, Harry Stones felt the quiet of his own home press against him like a question he could not answer. The following week arrived with cold wind and headlines that refused to fade. Every newspaper in San Francisco carried a photo of the new Mrs. Stones, the blind bride of a millionaire. Harry ignored the noise. He had survived worse storms. But when he passed the conference lobby and saw Emma's picture on the morning news screen, something inside him tightened. She had done nothing wrong, yet she was the one being judged. At home, she seemed untouched by the attention. She spent her mornings in the garden with the housekeeper, learning the scent of every flower. Sometimes, Harry would pause by the window, watching as she crouched beside the rose bushes, fingers brushing petals gently as if reading them like Braille. When she smiled, the air around her felt different. That evening, they had dinner together for the first time without assistants or cameras. The dining room was large enough to fit a dozen guests, but only 2 plates were set. Emma sat across from him, listening to the rain tapping softly against the windows. "Do you always eat in silence?" she asked. "I am used to silence," he replied. "It helps me think." "Too. And what are you thinking now?" "That this arrangement is temporary," he said flatly. 6 months. Then you will be free." She nodded slowly, cutting a piece of bread. "Freedom is not measured by time, Mr. Stones. It is measured by what you do with it." He stared at her for a long moment. "You sound certain of everything." "I am not certain of sight," she said quietly, "but I am certain of truth." "Zah." Her words stayed with him that night as he walked through the dark hallways of his mansion. He passed the room where she slept and heard faint music playing, a slow piano piece. It was his late mother's favorite song. He stopped, hand against the wall, remembering a time when the house had been filled with laughter and not with contracts and deadlines. Days later, the first gala approached. Harry had planned it as a publicity event for the company's new foundation, but Emma insisted on writing her own short speech. "You will not have to say much," he told her. "Just stand beside me." She smiled. "I will do that, but I will also speak for myself." When the night came, the ballroom glittered with chandeliers and press lights. Reporters whispered as Emma entered, guided by Harry's hand. For a brief moment, she seemed fragile among the crowd of executives and flashing cameras. Then she raised her head, smiled faintly, and faced the direction of the microphones. "I cannot see your faces," she began, "but I can feel your presence, and I know that the light we chase every day does not always come from our eyes. It comes from what we choose to give others." The room fell silent. Harry looked at her, astonished. When the applause came, it was louder than he expected. He saw board members exchange approving glances, and even his uncle, standing near the bar, seemed momentarily disarmed. Later that night, after the guests had gone, Harry found Emma in the quiet garden behind the ballroom. The fog from the bay drifted low across the lawn. She was standing near the fountain, her hand hovering over the water's surface. "You stole the evening," he said softly. She smiled without turning. "Did I make you look good?" He laughed quietly. "Better than any deal I have ever signed." She tilted her head toward the sound of his voice. "Then perhaps this contract is working after all." He stepped closer. "You make it sound almost real." "Maybe it already is," she said. "Not because of the papers, but because of how we are beginning to see each other." The words unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. When she reached out, her fingers brushed against his sleeve, light and hesitant. He did not move. For a moment he felt her touch travel through every guarded part of him. Then she whispered, "Do you believe people can change, Harry?" He hesitated. "Change requires loss," he said. "I have already lost too much." She smiled sadly. "Then maybe it is time to find something again." She turned and walked toward the mansion, her cane tapping softly along the stone path. Harry stood alone beneath the fog, her words echoing in his mind. For the first time in years, he could not tell whether he was afraid of losing control or of finally learning how to feel again. The following month brought the soft chill of early autumn to San Francisco. The fog rolled heavier across the bay, and the air smelled faintly of rain and salt. Inside the Stones' mansion, the silence that once felt safe now seemed almost alive. Harry spent long hours at work, reviewing reports, signing documents, and trying to forget the sound of Emma's voice echoing through the halls. She had become part of his daily rhythm in ways he never expected. Each morning she would walk through the garden, memorizing paths by sound, and in the evenings she would wait in the library, reading aloud from an audiobook. Sometimes, when he returned late, he found her asleep in the armchair by the fire, the headphones still playing softly. He never woke her. He would just cover her with a blanket and stand there, staring at her peaceful face longer than he should have. One night the quiet was broken by a storm. Lightning flashed across the windows, thunder shook the glass, and the power flickered out for several seconds. Harry rushed downstairs, finding Emma standing in the hallway, her cane forgotten at her side. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I am fine," she said, voice calm but trembling slightly. "I just could not tell where I was for a moment." He stepped closer. "Stay still." He reached for her hand and guided it to his shoulder. "There, now you know where I am." Her fingers tightened gently, tracing the outline of his collar, then stopping at his chest. "You feel warm," she said softly. The lights came back on, but neither of them moved. The thunder rolled farther away. For the first time, Harry saw the small, vulnerable tremor in her hand and the trust it carried. He wanted to say something but could not. Later, when the storm passed, they sat together in the conservatory, the city lights glowing faintly through the rain-streaked glass. Emma turned her face toward him. "When I lost my sight, I thought I would never be able to see beauty again. But I was wrong. Beauty is sound, kindness, and the way someone's voice changes when they stop pretending." Harry stared at her, words caught in his throat. "You make it sound so simple." "Destal." "It is simple," she said. "You just have to want to see differently." The next day, Harry brought her to the company's research division, a place he rarely allowed outsiders to visit. The sterile halls smelled of alcohol and cold metal. "This is where it started," he said quietly. "The first formula I created after my mother died, a treatment for degenerative blindness." Emma turned toward the faint echo of his footsteps. "You were trying to cure what I live with, Dumbertin." "I was trying to fix something I could not accept," he admitted. "Maybe I never learned to forgive the world for taking what I loved." She reached for his hand. "Then stop fighting it. Some things are not meant to be fixed. They are meant to be understood." Her words hit deeper than he expected. As she walked beside him, her hand brushing the edge of the lab tables, Harry noticed the way every scientist stopped to look at her, quietly moved by the sight of their cold, clinical space being touched by something so human. That evening, they returned home in silence. In the living room, the fire burned low. Emma stood by the window, listening to the city hum below. "Harry," she said suddenly, "what will happen when the 6 months end?" "He hesitated. You will have your freedom, as promised. And you?" "I will have my company." She smiled faintly. "Then we will both have what we wanted." But her voice carried a sadness that even she could not hide. Harry wanted to tell her that what he wanted had already begun to change, but pride kept his mouth closed. When she turned away, her cane tapping softly on the floor, he realized the sound had become the pulse of his home, and he wondered, for the first time, what silence would feel like without it. 2 weeks later, the calm life that had settled over the mansion began to crack. It started with a single phone call during a board meeting. Harry's assistant whispered something into his ear, and every muscle in his body went rigid. A scandal had broken online. Headlines filled the screens before noon. The blind bride of Stone Farm. A corporate cover-up? Articles accused Harry of exploiting his marriage for public sympathy, using Emma as a prop to gain trust before the launch of a new medical fund. Someone had leaked private photos from the gala, showing Harry and Emma together under a misleading caption, "The perfect marketing couple." When Harry returned home, reporters had already gathered outside the gate. Cameras flashed as soon as he stepped out of the car. Inside, Emma sat on the couch, her hands folded in her lap, her face pale. "They called me today," she said quietly. "They wanted to know how much you paid me to play your wife." His chest tightened. "You did not answer them, did you?" "I told them the truth," she said, "that I married you because you asked me to." He exhaled sharply and turned away. "You should have said nothing. Silence is safer." Her voice trembled. "For whom? You or the company?" He faced her again, eyes cold. "This marriage was a contract, Emma. You knew that from the beginning." "Yes," she whispered. "But I did not know you would despise me for keeping it." The words stung more than he wanted to admit. He left the room before anger could betray the guilt rising inside him. The next morning, the story reached the national news. Investors demanded an emergency meeting. Harry's uncle, Charles Stone, used the chaos to his advantage, claiming Harry's reckless personal decisions had endangered the company's reputation. By the time the meeting ended, half the board had turned against him. That evening, Emma waited for him at home, standing near the grand staircase. She had overheard enough from the staff to understand what had happened. "They are taking the company from you, are they not?" He laughed bitterly. "My uncle has been waiting for this moment for years." She stepped closer. "Then fight for it." He shook his head. "I do not even know who to trust anymore." She hesitated, then reached out, her fingertips brushing his sleeve. "You can trust me." He looked at her hand, then at her face. "Why would you help me after everything I said?" "Because I can hear the way you speak when you are hurting," she said softly. "You sound just like I did when I lost my sight." Something in him broke. For the first time, he allowed himself to meet her halfway. "Emma," he said quietly, "I am sorry." She smiled faintly. "Then start by proving that sorry means something." That night, she sat beside him at the long table, helping him sort through old emails and contracts. Together, they traced the leak back to his uncle's assistant. The next morning, with evidence in hand, Harry walked into the boardroom and laid it all out. Every camera in the room caught his uncle's expression shift from arrogance to shock. Within hours, Charles Stone was removed from his position. Harry retained control of Stone Farm, but the victory felt strangely hollow. When he returned home that evening, the house was silent. Emma's suitcase stood by the door. She was waiting for him, her cane resting at her side. "The contract ends tomorrow," she said quietly. "I kept my word." He stared at her, unable to speak. She smiled sadly. "You once said I taught you how to see differently. I hope you never forget that." She turned to leave, her fingers brushing against his as she passed. The touch was so light that it barely existed, but it left him breathless. When the door closed behind her, the mansion felt empty again. The sound of her cane tapping on the marble steps faded into the distance. Harry Stone stood alone, realizing too late that the only thing truly worth keeping had already walked away. The next morning came with a heavy silence. The rain that had lingered for days finally stopped, but the air still smelled of it. Harry sat alone in his office overlooking the bay, the city glimmering beyond the mist. He had won back his company, yet the victory felt like ashes in his hands. Every message of congratulations that arrived on his phone only reminded him of the one person who had not called. He tried to work, but every thought returned to Emma. The image of her walking away with her white cane replayed in his mind over and over. For the first time, he noticed how her absence changed the house itself. The echo of her voice no longer drifted through the halls. The piano was silent, and even the sea seemed quieter. By afternoon, he found himself standing in her old room. The bed was neatly made, the scent of lavender faint in the air. On the bedside table lay a folded note. It was written in neat raised lines braille, pressed carefully into thick paper. He traced it with his fingers even though he could not read it. He knew it was meant for him. He took a picture of it and sent it to a braille translator at the foundation she had once mentioned. Within an hour, the message came back. "Thank you for teaching me that darkness can still hold light. Take care of the world you tried to fix, and take care of your own heart." The words broke something inside him. For years, he had built walls around his life. Money, control, reputation, and she had dismantled them with a touch. That evening, his lawyer arrived with the finalized annulment papers. Harry stared at them, unsigned. "She wanted freedom," the lawyer said. Harry shook his head slowly. "No, she wanted truth." He spent the night walking through the city, past the bay where the fog curled like smoke, through the narrow streets where Emma once liked to listen to street musicians. At last, he stopped outside the community center where she volunteered before their marriage. The door was open, and soft music drifted from inside. When he stepped in, he saw her sitting with a group of children, helping them arrange tactile letters on a board. She was smiling, unaware he was there. The sight hit him harder than any victory or loss he had ever known. One of the children tugged her sleeve and whispered, "Someone is standing by the door." Emma turned toward the sound. "Who is it?" "It is me," Harry said quietly. The room fell silent. She stood, hands trembling slightly. "You found me." "I never stopped looking," he said. "Emma, I was wrong about everything. I thought power meant control, but you showed me that it means care. You showed me what I could not see." She smiled faintly. "Harry, you do not have to say that." "I do," he replied, "because for the first time, I want to say something real." He took a step closer. "If you still believe in second chances, come back with me. Not as part of a contract, as yourself, as the woman who taught me how to see." Emma reached out, her hand searching until it found his face. Her fingertips brushed the scar on his cheek, the same way they had the night of the storm. "You still feel the same," she whispered. He caught her hand gently. "Maybe now you can tell if I am smiling." She nodded, her own smile warm and trembling. "I can tell. Look." And for the first time in months, Harry Stones felt that the world was no longer gray. It was alive again, because she was in it. The following days unfolded quietly, like a new beginning neither of them had dared to expect. Emma agreed to return to the mansion, but only after Harry promised one thing, that there would be no more secrets. When she arrived, the house no longer felt like a cage of glass and marble. He had opened the windows, replaced the cold paintings with soft colors, and filled the garden with the flowers she loved most. The scent of jasmine now followed her wherever she walked. Each morning they had breakfast together in the sunroom. She would pour his coffee with steady hands, laughing softly when she spilled a few drops, and he would read the newspaper aloud for her, his voice calmer than it had ever been. It was not romance made of grand gestures, but of small routines that quietly mended two broken souls. One afternoon, as the fog rolled in from the bay, Emma waited by the balcony. "You have been distracted all day," she said gently. Harry looked at her and nodded. "There is something I have been preparing. Something that belongs to you." He guided her to the elevator that led to the private research wing. When the doors opened, she heard faint humming machines and smelled the sterile air of the laboratory. "Why are we here?" she asked. He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a letter embossed with the logo of Stone Farm's medical division. She ran her fingers over it, puzzled. "What is this?" "It is the official approval for the Green Site project," he said. "Your name is on it. We developed a new treatment using your data as part of the study. You inspired it." Her lips parted slightly. "My name?" "Yes," he said, "because you taught me that blindness is not a weakness. It is another way to perceive the world. This treatment will go to every patient who needs hope, and it will carry your name with it." She stood there in silence for a moment, the sound of the machines surrounding her. "You turned what I am into something that can help others," he smiled. "You turned me into someone who finally understands why helping matters." Juptu. Later that evening, they attended a press conference at the hospital to announce the project. When journalists asked why it was called Green Site, Harry simply said, "Because she gave me the courage to see through the dark." As they left the building, the sunset broke through the fog for the first time in weeks. The golden light spilled across the pavement, touching Emma's face. She turned her head slightly toward it. "It feels warm," she whispered. Harry took her hand. "It suits you." "Hoda." She smiled faintly. "If I could see, I think I would like this color." "You already do," he said quietly. "You just feel it differently." That night they returned home to find a small crowd waiting outside the gates, reporters, neighbors, and even former critics of Stone Farm. But this time, the questions were kind. People thanked Emma for her speech, for her courage, for reminding them that compassion still existed in a world obsessed with perfection. When the gates closed behind them, Harry turned to her. "You changed everything," he said. Emma shook her head. "No, we changed everything." For the first time, the mansion was filled not with silence but with laughter, soft music, and the sound of two lives learning to belong. It was no longer a contract or an obligation. It was something deeper, an understanding that love was never about sight. It was about the courage to be seen completely. Several months later, the world seemed brighter for both of them. The Green Site project had become one of the most promising medical breakthroughs in years, and Stone Farm was now known not only for its success, but also for its compassion. For the first time, Harry was no longer a man defined by power. He was a man defined by purpose, and by the woman who had taught him how to see beyond the surface. That morning, he found Emma standing in the garden, facing the sea breeze. She wore a simple cream dress, her hair moving gently in the wind. "You always find your way here," he said softly. "I like the sound of the water," she replied. "It reminds me that everything moves forward." He smiled. "Then perhaps it is time we moved forward, too." He guided her to the car and told her they were going somewhere special. She did not ask where. She trusted him. The drive through San Francisco was quiet, the streets painted in the gold of early evening. When they stopped, Emma stepped out slowly, her cane tapping on the stone path. The air smelled faintly of paint and wood polish. "Where are we?" she asked. Harry took her hand. "Inside. You will know soon." As they entered, soft music filled the space. She could hear the hush of a small crowd, the rustle of fabric, and the quiet excitement in the air. "It feels like a gallery," she murmured. "It is," he said. "Welcome to the art of Emma Green." Her breath caught. "What did you say?" He led her forward, placing her hand on the nearest frame. Beneath her fingertips, she felt raised line sculptures and textured canvases designed for touch, each inspired by her story. "Every piece here was created by artists who were blind or visually impaired," he explained. "You inspired this foundation, Emma. This is my way of saying thank you." Tears filled her eyes. "You built this for me." "For us," he said quietly. "You gave me back my humanity. The least I could do was give back what you gave me, light." The crowd began to applaud softly. Emma turned her face toward the sound, her hands trembling slightly. "Harry, I do not know what to say." "Then do not say anything," he whispered. "Just stay." She reached for him, her hand finding his face. Her fingers traced the familiar scar on his cheek, and this time he leaned into her touch, instead of pulling away. "You once said you could feel sadness in my face," he said. "Tell me what you feel now." She smiled, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Peace and love." He took a deep breath. "Then it is time for me to ask something without a contract, without conditions." He dropped to one knee and opened a small velvet box. "Emma Green, will you marry me for real?" The crowd gasped softly, waiting. Emma covered her mouth with one hand, then nodded, her voice shaking. "Yes, Harry, I will." And as he slipped the ring onto her finger, the room filled with applause. In that moment, the man who once believed love was a liability, finally understood it had been his greatest miracle all along. The following spring, San Francisco shimmered beneath a clear blue sky. The mansion on the hill was no longer silent. It was filled with music, laughter, and the scent of blooming jasmine. Guests gathered under white canopies in the garden, where ribbons swayed gently in the breeze. Today was the day Harry Stones and Emma Green would marry, not by contract, not for business, but for love. Emma stood near the arch of flowers, her hand resting lightly on the arm of her friend from the community center. Her wedding dress was simple, elegant, and lined with faint embroidery that she could feel with her fingertips. She smiled as she heard the familiar rhythm of footsteps approaching. She did not need to see to know it was him. Harry stopped in front of her, his voice warm and steady. "You look beautiful." She laughed softly. "You always say that." "Because it is always true," he replied. The guests fell silent as the ceremony began. The minister spoke of trust, courage, and the kind of love that sees through darkness. When it was time for the vows, Harry took her hands in his. "Emma," he said, his voice low but clear, You walked into my life when I was surrounded by walls. You taught me to see with my heart, not my eyes. You gave meaning to everything I built. I promised to spend the rest of my life proving worthy of what you gave me." Tears shimmered on her lashes. She smiled and whispered, "Harry, you gave me back the world, not by fixing me, but by loving me as I am. You made me see light again, and for that I will never let go." When they exchanged rings, the crowd erupted into applause. The moment he kissed her, the bells of the city echoed faintly in the distance, as if San Francisco itself was celebrating their promise. Later that evening, as the sun dipped beyond the Golden Gate, they stood alone by the railing of the garden, the wind cool against their skin. The bay glowed with streaks of gold and pink. Emma leaned her head against his shoulder. "It sounds like the world is smiling," she said. Harry smiled too. "It is, because you are in it. Love." She reached up, touching his face the way she always did, tracing the scar with gentle familiarity. "You still feel like home," she whispered. He kissed her hand. "You are home." The camera of the world might have once captured a cold millionaire and his blind bride. But the truth was simpler, more powerful: a man who finally learned to see, and a woman who never needed eyes to find love. As the lights of the city flickered to life below them, their laughter carried through the night, a promise of something everlasting. For Harry Stones and Emma Green, what began as a contract ended as the one thing neither of them expected forever.